before we get started.
All right.
We are live.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone, thanks for coming out. We will go ahead and call to order now. We'll do a quick roll call with everybody that is here. And so from the 1st Congressional District, Commissioner Tobias.
Present.
Okay. And doesn't look like Commissioner Anthony is on right now. We'll see if he comes on a little bit later. From the 3rd, Commissioner McClellan.
Present.
Okay. And Commissioner Rangel doesn't look like he's on as of yet. We talked about Susan as well. I'm here from the 4th as well. From the 6th Congressional District, Commissioner Prentice.
Present.
Awesome. And Commissioner Bissonette from the 7th.
Present. Good evening.
All right. And Tony from Commissioner Phillips from the 8th.
Present.
Awesome. Okay, guys, so we can go ahead and get started. The way that we had the agenda set up today, because this is the oddity of oddities that I'm actually done at 4 o'clock. So we're going to have Anne-Marie give us some updates from a recent MGGG event that she went to, Training the Trainer. So she's going to go ahead and give us some updates and kind of give us some insight to what that was. So go right ahead, Commissioner McClellan.
Thanks. And I'm going to try to share my screen to show that little report that that I hope you guys were able to read, or maybe not. That's why I'm sharing it now. And I want to thank Moon and her group for having the Train the Trainer. It was very educational. And so I just have a couple comments, and this is kind of putting on the project manager's hat and is things to think about, and I'm sure that Moon has ideas. And so I went to the Train the Trainer on January 13th, and what I wanted to share is this kind of is how you map your communities of interest, which was what we were learning to do. So I went ahead and after the fact tried to make one, and it was pretty, it was pretty easy. I was just trying to map out the Red Cedar watershed that's in my area and pick out the counties and the areas. And it's kind of small, but what you do here is you put in what your community name is, and I just called it a test about it, and then you give it a name, and then you put in all the characteristics of why this would be a community of interest. And this is what the trainers will be so helpful in helping people decide what to put in here that will give us information, or the line drawers, when it comes to that. So one of the things that Moon's group I was concerned about was privacy. So when you create one of these maps, it's not linked to your name. You don't log in. There's no login, no password, none of that. But you put in here your URL. When you go to save it, you don't put it in. It actually creates it for you. So what a person needs to do is save this somewhere so you can go back and look at it again if you need to. Say you went in and did it and you had a thought and you want to go back and edit it, you have to find this URL, and then when you go to save it, it will give it a new URL. However, these characteristics will be almost the same excepting for your edits. So one of the things that might be a concern is that we end up with, say, multiple copies of Red Cedar Watershed. They all have different URLs, but these descriptions are just, almost the same. Which one do we pay attention to when people go in and edit an area? So that's one thing that is manageable, but we just need to figure it out how we're going to manage that. And then the other nice thing is that you can have an event code. So perhaps maybe a certain trainer for a certain area will have their event code, and then all the maps that are made during that event are coded to this event code. So you can go back and trace it to whoever was collecting all the data in case there was some questions or something after the fact. So that's very good. And it's just my questions, Moon, here is how we're going to manage it. I think we just need to put a little thought into that, and you probably have. And I suggest a test event code for the commissioners just to use as a sandbox so we can go in and play and do whatever we want to do and not really think, everyone will know it's just test data.
We just dropped a link in the chat for you guys. We made that for you. So you have your own event code now called PMC demo.
Oh, thank you. And so then and the system, the technical part is just beautiful. It's really nice and it's easy to see your work. And just for organizational considerations, we just need to think about who will be the trainers or the hosts for gathering the community input. What do we want to divide it up by geographical areas? And then these event codes, I guess they get set up by Moon's group in advance. So we have control over that. And then just some things, how will data from community members who don't use the event codes be accessible? So if somebody just comes in on the fly after, and does it all on their own, they'll have a URL, but how will we get that? And how will the community of interest maps be used actually during the line drawing process? And who will make a decision on whether the community of interest should be taken into account when the line drawers draw them? So those are decision points that we're going to be at probably before we know it. So we need to these are just thoughts. And then as far as potential partners to gather community of interest data via DistrictR, we know that the Fair Maps Coalition, Grassroots Coalition is very active and would like to participate. I can speak for my CD3, the Western Wisconsin for Nonpartisan Voting Districts is a grassroots organization that covers kind of the west half from like Eau Claire, kind of out to the Mississippi River. And the League of Women Voters, speaking with the executive director there's chapters that cover most of the state. They are willing to support us and ask the chapters to identify representatives to help with this, because gerrymandering and fair maps has been a cause of theirs for years and years. And they have the local outreach because they do a lot of forums and voter registration and that kind of thing, so that they would be good at dealing with their local communities. And I'm sure there's others that Melissa and Susan's probably who's in charge of that area we're thinking about. But so that's kind of my report. And are there any questions? Okay, and as far as the other project manager update, we're so happy to have Moon on board. She's given us a bit of a timeline, so we'll be moving forward with the community of interest piece, and then we'll start working on criteria quite shortly. So I think we're finally underway, and then as we make decisions like on criteria, then we can be logging those into our report and starting to capture these decisions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne-Marie. All right. So guys, we actually asked Moon to come out today just to kind of give you guys some updates. Anne-Marie and I had a quick conversation with Moon about a week ago. It all seems like the same day in the pandemic. So just to kind of talk about general goals and again, working out those criteria and more of a timeline. So I just brought Moon on just to kind of answer any questions you may have. And Moon, if you have any outline of kind of what we talked about, just like just going by monthly for it and the direction that we're going.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, here are a few things I thought we'd briefly, Liz and I would briefly tell you, ask you, update you on, ask for updates on. So one, I wanted to say a little bit about what we imagine the process to be around this community collection that you were just hearing about. Like Anne-Marie raised the crucial question. So you collect all these maps and then what? So just a little bit about how we have in mind that we can support you in that. I wanted to actually start looking at a couple of the questions raised by the criteria with you tonight. Just plant some seeds and ask some questions, ask you to think about it, because we're here to support whatever framework you adopt, and to help you think about a framework that'll work best for your goals, but ultimately to kind of do math modeling and measurement around your framework. And then, yeah, timeline overall. So I guess those are the three things: COIs, criteria, timeline. Maybe I'll start by saying a couple quick things about COIs, and Liz, also please jump in. That's great. I'm so glad, Anne-Marie, the one you drew looks like exactly the kind of thing we were hoping to guide people towards with the training materials that we've been putting together. So there's, as we go, probably on about a monthly basis, and then in a big effort in the spring, we'll be offering you a data product, which is an aggregated COI shapefile. And so that means two things. First of all, we want you to have access to the raw data, everything everyone submitted. But with any luck, that will be thousands and thousands of maps. And so it's a lot. So what we're working on with actually kind of collaborating data scientists all around the country is a summarization technique. So suppose, Emery, remind me, what was the name of the watershed that you drew?
Red Cedar.
Red Cedar, okay. So suppose 10 different people drew the Red Cedar watershed. The basic idea of what we want to be able to do is notice, just from the kind of keyword search, that the phrase Red Cedar watershed came up in multiple maps. Notice that it came up with similar spatial tags, so it came up in the same part of the state. And then look at all those different submissions and try to figure out which block groups were always in the watershed, no matter who drew it, which ones were sometimes in, which ones were rarely in. And that's going to give us kind of a fuzzy edged heat map. So there won't just be one watershed with precise boundaries. It'll be fuzzy edged depending on what people drew. So this data product that we'll offer you is both a report on all the COIs that people submitted, just like in English, where we talk about what the themes were and where they came up, but also you'll be able to see these kind of heat maps of the important COIs while you're looking at a drawing interface. So you'll be able to draw districts while seeing the most important or the most frequently cited communities as you draw. I don't want to pretend that that data product is going to be perfect. It's hard to summarize, you know, people's neighborhoods and regions and points of interest. But as much as possible, we're going to try to give you a synthesized product so that you see at least the most important or the most frequently cited, the biggest themes that came up through the submission should be visible to you while you draw. That's the goal for that. In fact, we're working on a prototype right now to show one of those COIs in district E mode. So maybe the next time we join you on a call, we can do a screen share and show you what that's looking like as we are developing it. On COIs, I'll say the demo event link that we just gave you is live. So if one of you wants to go in and draw something now, you can, as soon as you hit share on it, we'll be able to see it from the organizer view. Okay, yeah, there isn't one in there yet. I'll do that before we hang up, just so you can see the organizer view. This PMC demo is set up so that you'll be able to see all the maps that all the people submit using this tag. Okay, so let's see. Liz, what am I missing on COIs?
I can add that some of the intention behind all the train the trainers is to make sure we're collecting really rich and useful COI maps, and a piece of that is trying to see the important keywords and draw people to explaining all those important keywords in the narrative. And the more information you provide in that text box, the more useful it is for us on the back end as we're searching for keywords to try to draw those fuzzy edges.
So yeah, to build on that, something we've really learned from running these trainings is the interview structure works really well for communities. Like you can go home with your laptop and draw your own, and that's fine. And you should all do that and encourage, encourage lots of people to do that. But something that works really well is if you pair up and I interview you about your community and you interview me about mine, because you'll find that that draws out a lot of that richness that Liz is talking about just by asking questions. For instance, I was doing this the other day with someone who lives in Northern Virginia, and she said, oh yeah, there's a big Asian community here. And I was able to say, okay, what are some of the nations of origin as far as, if it's an immigrant community, what are the nations of origin? Are there, grocery stores that are important to the community? Where would you find the kind of commercial locations that make that community cohere? And so I was able to draw a lot of richness out from her through that interview format that by asking questions she might not have thought to ask about her own neighborhood where she grew up. So if you come to those train the trainer sessions or send people to those, and just as a reminder, I'll drop the link for those sessions. Here's the flyer. We'll give you tips on sort of how to make those maximally useful so that they show up in that synthesis stage that we do later. Because you want like lots of good keywords in there so that you can start to have a data kind of foothold for noticing that things match up between my community, my description of my community and your description of your community. I think that's all I wanted to add on COIs. Emery, did you have more questions in there towards the end of your doc that I haven't addressed?
Well, when we start rolling this out and we're going to look for people to attend Train the Trainers and be like the trainer that's going to go out into the community, I'm assuming that piece lies on the connections of the commission to reach out, but then after we tell them go to sign up, and then, as far as having them and get assigned event codes, that I don't know if that goes through Liz. I'm assuming at that point, the connection or the commission is kind of out of at that point.
It's up to you how much control you want to exercise. We can set up new event codes for you in a matter of hours. That's not, that part's not, that's fairly automated. It's not so time intensive to do. We do have this kind of, force multiplier model in mind where some people attend the training, they interview their friends, and not just friends, hopefully, but all other kinds of sort of social network contacts. So with a little bit of luck, you should be able to go pretty viral with an effort like this. I think we find that because Districtr generates URLs, people tweet them a lot, and that tends to be pretty good at generating buzz when people start drawing maps of different kinds or communities of different kinds. We've done a lot of work with the League and with Common Cause in different states. I noticed, I think those were on your list of organizations.
At least the League, yeah.
Those are two organizations that are really on top of it with respect to this community collection. But a last thing I'll say about that is we will keep you updated on a rolling basis about where in the state we're getting submissions. And we can let you know if there's a congressional district or a part of the state that's just way behind the others. And then kind of tap the network to try to get more coverage in parts of the state that are lagging behind. So we can keep you abreast of submissions.
Go for it, Tony.
Is the COI data that you're doing, these maps, is that at all shared with counties and cities down the line? Because some of them might be relatively small or within a county district or something, or is that just something the people's maps will use?
No, that's a great point. So we've actually been explicitly bringing that up in some of these training sessions. No neighborhood is too small, and we will share the data with municipalities and with counties so that they could have access to this source of data to use in future local redistricting. We also like, as far as we're concerned, we don't own the data that's submitted on the tool. And we hope also that to get the, researchers excited at the universities around the state and at your various governmental orgs and think tanks. The idea is for this data to be fully open.
Thank you.
Okay, so great. I think that part is coming along nicely. So I wanted to take a moment and plant a few seeds about criteria, although of course I don't expect that we'll make key decisions tonight. But if it's okay, I'll share my screen and look at a memo in progress on criteria, just as we just wanted to put a memo together for you about some of the different criteria you'll need to think about and balance, and some questions for you as you develop your framework. So the list that Liz and I have here, and we only have a few plans to talk to you about tonight, and then we'll come back with the sort of harder and more complicated ones later. But tonight we wanted to talk about population balance and what units you build your plans from. A little bit about the Voting Rights Act, a couple of thoughts about compactness, and then contiguity and nesting. What I'm saving for the next conversation is preservation of political boundaries like municipal and ward and county lines, preservation of district cores, how exactly to take communities of interest into account once you have them, and partisan balance and competitiveness. It's important to talk about these, but I don't think we need to do it all at once or it'll feel extremely overwhelming. And then just quickly, in your constitution, the requirements, as far as I'm aware, are only listed for the legislative districts. And they talk about the political boundaries, contiguity, and compactness for both the Assembly and the Senate districts. And they mentioned nesting. So nesting is mentioned here. No assembly district shall be divided in the formation of a Senate district. That's nesting. There's no need to spell out population balance in the Voting Rights Act because those are federal a law in this case and a constitutional guidance in this case. So let's talk a little bit about these in turn, and we have some questions for you to think about. So your current plan. So the Assembly and Senate districts currently in place are very tightly balanced, as is the case in many, many states. So each district deviates no more than 1% from the ideal district size. So that's very, the limit, you can go up to 10% top to bottom deviation. So this is actually much closer than what's required by law or even by practice. And your current congressional plan, like in many, many states, is tuned as perfectly as possible with whole numbers. So there's no more than 1% deviation in the 2010 census population of your current congressional districts. So I wanted to ask you to think about what are your population balance targets for the new cycle? And how does this trade off with keeping wards whole? So you can certainly get to this 1% deviation for legislative districts while keeping wards whole. That's not something you have to sacrifice, but it is something that you'll have to sacrifice to get to 1% deviation for Congress. And so the question is, as I'm sure you all know, there's no rule that says you have to 1% balance. It's a practice, it's a habit rather than a rule. In fact, here's the table of how much balance there is currently in various states. And you can see that, for instance, Iowa has 76% deviation. And this is because they prioritize keeping counties whole. They don't split any counties and they get to 76% deviation. And that's perfectly legally defensible. West Virginia also has quite a large deviation relative to most states. And that was upheld. Their ability to do that was upheld because they had a reason in terms of their priorities for doing so. So the question for you to consider is, do you want to stick to the current balance of 1% deviation? If not, you might couple it with the question, what should the building blocks be? And you could, for example, prioritize building from whole wards over one person balance. I just thought I'd go through some of these, but do you have any questions or comments as I go? Please feel free.
Are you looking for opinions?
Sure, we might as well talk opinions, although I don't imagine anything will get decided tonight. But yeah, what's your thought about that?
Well, if I go first, I would say the way the Assembly and Senate districts are now is good, but the Congress, I'd like to see the wards stay intact.
Just a little editorializing on that. This is strictly a decision for you. One person balance is fine too. You can build out of whole wards, and then only at the last minute you can tune that to one person. And that way you will have made the important decisions while keeping wards whole, but tune at the last minute to get to one person deviation. You won't have to break that many wards to do that. So that's a compromise, is do the tuning last. Just don't put it up front as a major priority. One piece of information about the suggestion to keep wards whole. In the last few decades, so the Census Bureau collects precincts from the states in its VTD, or voting tabulation district program. And they started doing that in the 80s, I think it was, with the presumption that everybody would want to keep their precincts whole. And one person balance just kind of overran that prior presumption, but there's room for you as the People's Maps Commission to sort of decide what comes first, one person balance or kind of building out of pieces that people will understand. Okay, to move through a little bit and discuss these. Voting Rights Act, again, non-negotiable. The VRA is still the law of the land for the time being. And in Wisconsin, that will certainly require attention to the ability of Black and Hispanic communities, especially near Milwaukee, to elect candidates of choice. We'll be building a dashboard for you to look at some VRA considerations. I'll show you a mock-up now of what that dashboard will look like. And we're going to be, on our end, we're going to be paying attention also to the American Indian and Native American population in Wisconsin, and trying to understand if there's some VRA effective districts possible to build for Native population as well. If you have other thoughts for where you'd like us to look when it comes to VRA, you should let us know. And then meanwhile, we'll keep my VRA dashboard.
Well, I just had a quick question. We'll go over this one over our hearing, the last one. So one of the questions that I brought up was, in other similar commissions like our own, they usually will have someone working with them from a legal standpoint as well to make sure that everything stays within the parameters of the VRA. In your model, when you've done this before in the past, have you brought in people like during the process, before the process, or after we synthesize a couple maps, or what do you think would be the best way to go about it?
Yeah, that's a great question again for you guys to think about how you want to handle. I think it's in a lot of states, the practice is, as you say, to bring in someone specifically to kind of give you a seal of approval on your VRA compliance. This dashboard that I'm showing you is based on a project of my lab, together with Sam Hirsch, who is a Department of Justice veteran, longtime civil rights attorney, VRA attorney. So what I'm about to show you certainly takes a very sophisticated voting rights attorney's construction into account. I'll tell you how that comes out in this tool. But I would absolutely encourage you to get help from an attorney to make sure that you're comfortable with your VRA compliance. I think we can get you most of the way there in taking the right kinds of things into account. But our lab is data scientists and not attorneys. And it's important to keep that in mind. VRA compliance is something that's crucially important. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, again, what I'm showing you now is a collaboration with a VRA attorney, but the computer will never replace the attorney, right? Just to be clear. Okay, what I'm showing you is, of course, Louisiana. It's a state Senate plan for Louisiana. And what I want to show you is we built a VRA evaluation capacity into the dashboard. So you'll be able to see this for Wisconsin. And what we're showing you here is this is a Black effectiveness score, i.e. this is the likelihood that that district will perform effectively for Black voters in Louisiana. And here's how it's built. So let's try to understand that. For instance, let's look in the Baton Rouge area. So that's right around here, districts 19, 2021. These are in the Baton Rouge area. And suppose we wanted to understand this one here, district 19, and we wanted to understand why is it rated 61.6% effective. So we go down to district details and we pick out that district, district 19. And then what you see is this is showing you district 19's electoral history. And this is the Black candidate of choice in each of these recent elections. And this is showing you what percent of the vote in that district. So in district 19, this is what percentage of the vote was obtained by the candidate of choice. And then this is how that same person fared in the general election, if there was one. Louisiana has a jungle primary or Cajun primary. So sometimes there isn't a general election. If someone gets 50% in the first round, there is no second round. Okay, so again, I'm showing you the data that a voting rights attorney would look at to decide whether the district was effective. This is its actual electoral history. Notice this isn't based on how many Black people live there. And that's important from a constitutional point of view, that you don't let the racial demographics of the district predominate over your district drawing. So you all know that that's crucially important in your drawing of the lines, that you not lean on race statistics too much when you draw the lines. So this is an approach that is in line with VRA practice. We don't lean on the Black percentage in the district. We look at the electoral history and we look at whether candidates of choice can be elected out of that district. Okay, so this is sort of in keeping with current best practices for the VRA. But again, the computer is not a lawyer. It's just showing you some of the same information that lawyers use to decide on effectiveness. So this is what goes into our score that determines that district 19 here is 61.6% likely effective. This is the kind of thing that I think you're going to want to see when you draw your districts in Wisconsin, is how likely they are to perform for communities of color and other relevant minorities.
A quick question, Moon. The history, what elections are used in the history? And can you just, for example, show another example that has a voting rights score that's really low?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look. So yeah, let's look at districts. Let me see if I can turn on the district numbers. Okay, so this red district here is district 23. And sure enough, 23 has a low score. So let's try and find out why. So this district here to the north of Baton Rouge, if I go, oops, that's 22. If I go take a look, I can see the reason this has, so green means they would have advanced out of the primary.
Okay.
So this person advances out of the primary because they were first and they had a majority. This person wouldn't have advanced out of the primary because they were second and someone else had a majority. So they would not have advanced. This person came in first in a plurality situation. So the green just tells you if they would have advanced. So why does this district have a low score? Because in only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 10 primaries, can the person get through? And then if you go down to generals, you see the problem. So in order to be elected, of course, a candidate of choice has to make it through the primary and the general. And you see here only about a 60-40 success record in primaries and a very poor success record in generals. And so that all gets combined in the score. I can send you the paper that explains how the score is built. But that's what gets combined in the score. That's why this has such a low score for effectiveness. It's unlikely to both nominate and elect a candidate of choice. Incidentally, I should say the way this tool works is you can, it's live and it updates live. So as I erase, it should happen that these numbers change. So I think District 23's number just changed a little bit because it immediately updates. All the data is in here. All the electoral history of all these precincts is in here. So as you redraw the map, you don't have to kind of wait for a turnaround. You get a new effectiveness score immediately. Right. So again, I can't stress this strongly enough. This is the data science attempt to give you the information you need to make a good judgment based on the best available information. But it is almost every state I've talked to about their process does actually include the opinion of a VRA expert at some point in the term. Might be an attorney or it might just be kind of an experienced expert who's done VRA work before. But I think we can help you with this, and we have lots of great tools at our disposal. But I think you'll want to get a second opinion on your VRA compliance. Okay, so that is what I wanted to show you for VRA dashboard. So for the memo we wrote, no decisions need to be made for this for now, in terms of our timeline of what we're trying to do to support you, except if you want to tell us about some other communities to look out for as possibly important for a Wisconsin VRA analysis at any of the levels of districting. Okay. So as not to turn this into a super long conversation, let's just talk compactness quickly, contiguity and nesting. So compactness, that's the one that says that your shapes shouldn't be crazy, right? Compactness is what starts to tread in the territory where there are lots and lots of metrics out there with lots and lots of names, and it can start to feel overwhelming, all the different compactness scores. So I just wanted to mention the two that are the most popular in expert reports are something called the Polsby-Popper score, how wild is the boundary, and something called the REOC score, which is how close are the districts to being perfectly round circles. If you ask me, of course, both of these are a little silly, but they're traditional. And so I think at a minimum, you're going to want to report all the kind of famous traditional scores for your plans. There are, newer metrics. Something that we use in our lab a lot is the cut edges score. Let me sort of illustrate what that is. So taking a look at this map, anytime two precincts are next to each other, but they're assigned to different districts, like these two, the red and the green here, we'd call that a cut edge. That's something, if you were cutting out the districts with scissors, your scissors would have to separate these two from each other. Does that make sense? Okay, so the cut edges score is just how many pairs did you have to sever to make your map? And so you can see that's sort of intuitive. A really complicated winding map is going to be very complicated to cut out with scissors. And so it's going to have a lot of cut edges. And a simpler map is going to have fewer cut edges. And so we find that that's a really useful score to keep in mind when we look at plans and we want to gauge their compactness. And so, I'm raising this with you to say, you can think about an approach that takes all the traditional metrics and reports them all. You could, of course, choose your favorite metric and just define compactness to be measured by that for the purposes of the PMC, right? Or you could have compactness play a more kind of a softer role and just say that among comparable plans, you'll prefer one that's more compact. And for that, you don't have to necessarily pick your favorite metric, But if you do pick a primary metric, it'll make the comparisons easier later. So there's a kind of trade-off decision you have to make. More specificity now might feel painful, but later you'll have a very clear way of deciding which of two maps is better. And so that's really a deliberation for you to undertake. In any event, all the scores I've ever heard of, we are able to measure. I haven't met a score yet that we can't measure. So we can certainly report them all for you, but I think you'll find it valuable to have some internal deliberation early about whether one of these scores is going to rise to the top in terms of your understanding of how to compare the compactness of two plans. Okay, any reactions or feedback on that? If not, I'll go on to the last two I wanted to talk about today. Oh, that looks like maybe.
It's Howard. That conversation that you're talking about, in which some priorities are reached by the group with regard to favoring certain criteria and softening others, perhaps as a sort of consequence of that. How do you organize that conversation? That's something we've talked about a little bit. Is that something that's done by asking the commissioners to rank their priorities and looking at the aggregate of those rankings? Or is it done more informally than that, less systematically than that? How exactly does that it seems to me that that's a key conversation that you're referring to, and that it necessarily occurs among the commissioners.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The question you're asking is one that I think about all the time. I'm actually teaching a class on this spring. this question, the social choice question. How do you take the views of, in your case, a commission, and aggregate those into a consensus that you can use to make decisions? So you could do it in a formal way, such as by having, as you suggested, by having each commissioner rank a list of priorities, and then using, I could point you to several different good ways of aggregating the commissioner's individual input into a consensus ranking. There's no perfect scheme for doing that, but there are pretty good ones. I'm happy to sort of show you how that's done. Something that would be softer would be to take this list, this memo that we're preparing for you, and of these, just cleave them into a group of more important and a group of worthy of consideration but less important. It's not the case that just because you rank them, you've eliminated all ambiguity. So I don't think ranking is necessary or sufficient to get you where you want to be. And in my mind, where you want to be is in the clearest possible position later to take two proposed maps, whether they come from you, whether they come from an 8th grade class, whether they come from the legislature, wherever they come from, and say, how can I compare these two maps? I don't think a ranked list of criteria is going to help. And I think it actually gives false precision, a false feeling of precision when you make an ordered list. So personally, from the point of view of someone who wants to advise you on this, the thing I'd most like you to do is separate into the most crucial, the still interesting, and the much less important, just to give some sort of grouping. And then for the ones, I've put bulleted questions for you here. So sometimes there will be tangible questions about how to interpret each one that it'd be fantastic if you deliberate about. And even if you don't have something incredibly precise to say, any language that you can produce about your interpretations is going to be helpful as we try to help you compare plans down the road.
So my follow-up question is, assuming the adoption of the sort of informal, here are our favorite, here's a cluster of favorites, here's a cluster of slightly less favorite, and so on. When do you suggest that occurs? Or to put it another way, is that in the timeline?
Yeah, it is in the timeline. And we had hoped to use February, and I'll pull up the timeline after this. Maybe that bled into March, but by the end of March, we'd like you to feel pretty solid about your criteria framework.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll pull that up next. Okay, so I'll just touch on these quickly. Contiguity is pretty straightforward. You want each district to be a whole piece. But the question here, which I think I raised in a previous call, is some of your wards are discontiguous for quirky historical reasons. An individual ward will be in two pieces. They might not even be that close together. And the question is, how do you want to handle that in the contiguity of a district? Do you want to allow a district to have a little island somewhere if it's caused by a ward discontiguity? Or do you want to require that no matter what the wards themselves look like, that the districts have the property that you can walk from any point to any other point in the district? So I think that's more or less a yes/no question. Will you allow districts to be discontiguous if it is caused by ward discontiguity?
That's something just to bring up, that we kind of learned a little bit about during our first couple of hearings that we had. One example that was brought up from the CLC paper was the 4th district in Illinois, where there was a discontinuity with the Latin American population in the 4th district of Illinois, essentially. And so they were not physically connected, but they kind of connected them among in this horseshoe picture, just to kind of give that population, a representative to vote on their issues. And so, I think that's something to kind of bring up in our communities of interest as well. And we kind of have that discussions in the event that we come to that, but it's just one perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you could have a different reason for allowing discontiguity, such as COIs. But you should, if you want to kind of, first of all, for the congressional plan, there's nothing in the Wisconsin State Constitution that describes any requirements in particular for the congressional plan. You have a lot of latitude. The state constitutional language around the legislative districts is that they should consist of contiguous territory. And so I think for legislative districts, this is probably the only kind of discontiguity you can allow. But for congressional, absolutely, as Chris is saying, you can think about other reasons to be discontiguous. Nesting is a requirement, but here's the question for you. This is a procedural question for you. Do you want, there's a few different ways that you could achieve a nested plan. You could create House districts first and then group them into Senate districts. You could create Senate districts first and then split them into House districts. Or you could kind of adjust both sets of borders at the same time. Mathematically, in terms of giving you advice, it's a much easier problem if you do House first then Senate, or Senate first then House, either way. But if you sequence those, it becomes easier to clarify the decisions and the trade-offs. That doesn't mean you should do it just because it's easier to analyze. So this is a question for you. What do you imagine your procedure to be for producing nested districts? Okay. And that's it. That's all we wanted to review today, and then maybe save some of the others for that are probably even a little more complicated for the next time we chat. Okay, and then I will.
To answer the question on timeline, we had originally sketched out February as the month where we start to think and discuss and kind of collaborate on defining the criteria, and then March being the month that we could kind of establish what is most important.
I'll pull that up now, exactly like Liz is saying. So here's a proposed timeline. This is something that's just in progress that we're thinking through, but this is, so we're doing great for our timeline so far. We've already done everything we wanted to do in January, and the month's not even over, so that's fantastic. February, we want to collaborate with the commission to support criteria specification, so we've already gotten a start on that. And then the hope is that the commission sets its framework of criteria by the end of the month of March. I'll review the rest of our suggested timeline to you, but remember, these are just suggestions. So COI collection will be going on from now through the official COI collection. We propose that you pick an end date in June so that we can aggregate it and synthesize it and get it to you in a timely way. Of course, people can keep submitting after that. But our suggestion is that you all don't wait for the census data to start doing your drawing. As you know, we think it's a good idea for you to get a jump on that. So perhaps you could prepare a first round of draft plans in April using these new 2020 wards, which we already have available to you in Districtor. What we need to do is get the most accurate and up-to-date population estimates that we can on those wards. And that way, if you draw plans that are balanced with respect to the latest American Community Survey data, they're likely to stay very close to balanced once the numbers are refreshed. So this gives you a real jump on the process of starting to understand the trade-offs. There's no reason to wait for the perfect numbers. Using ACS numbers is going to already give you the opportunity to obtain really good balance. We'll give you a 2-week turnaround for evaluation on any draft plans that you propose. Collection continues, as I said, through May and June. We expect, right, so we'll get you your final report on COI aggregation also in the month of June. We think with a little bit of luck, we'll get the official census population data in the month of July, fingers crossed. That's now considered optimistic by the Bureau. It could go into fall, but perhaps as soon as July, we'll have those numbers. And if that is the case, then you could finalize your plans as soon as August, which I think puts you in a great position with respect to communication with the public about how, you know, this process, this very transparent process, the deliberation that went into it, the criteria you had in place, and how you settled on these particular plans. We will deliver a final report on the plans along the lines of the criteria that you suggest. So that's the timeline that we had in mind. And does that sound reasonable to you folks? Do you have any questions about that? Anything that you think you'd expect to see earlier or later?
It sounds good on our end. I get, Anne-Marie and I have heard it before, but I mean, this is great. And thanks for putting that together. I think it answers a lot of questions, and we'll do a better job in going forward to kind of publicize it as much as possible, especially the train the trainer events that are upcoming, just to kind of get groups of interest involved too. And I think that'll be helpful as well.
Sounds great. So I'll make sure you have by email the list of sort of conversation starter questions that we had for you, so that you could bring us back to another one of these meetings some point soon, and we could see what your thoughts are.
Awesome. We have a couple that are scheduled in February too, just with the interest of kind of having those discussions about our ranks and things like that. And we can send it out to you as well, just to kind of keep you guys on the calendar if you have time available.
Sounds great. Oh, the only other thing that was raised that we haven't addressed yet was the question of a submission portal. So I just want to say Liz has already been in touch. So you already have a text-based submission portal on the commission's website, so people can already give you feedback. But we want to make sure to have a submission portal that can take feedback in map form, not just in comment form. So Liz, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we are thinking about what we want the front end of that submission portal to be and what we want it to ask for. And this might be addressing, actually, Anne-Marie, one of your questions about tagging the map. You might want to think about if a tagged map might be an official submission, or if you need to submit officially through this portal where you give your name and maybe a little bit more information about how you can be contacted. So we're just thinking now and kind of mocking up what we want that to look like. But we're hoping that this submission portal can be pretty open-ended and accept maps in all sorts of different formats, whether it's a PDF or a JPEG, if someone draws a hand map, or if they want to continue just submitting a text narrative. So that's something that we still want to launch this month, but we're researching and kind of talking about what makes the most sense, if we should run through the commission or if we should set up our own portal.
Maddie, did you have anything you wanted to add about that?
No, I was just ready to chime in if needed, but no, I think that sums it up. And commissioners, for your awareness, Liz and I spoke the other day, and the goal will be whatever the portal is going to look like will be hosted on the wisconsin.gov/people's maps website. So it'll be obviously available very widely. And Liz's timeline is exactly right. We're ready to roll and get things integrated with the website as needed whenever we get those ideas.
Okay, so maybe I think you all might have more business to discuss, so we should step out and leave you to it.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much for coming, and we'll keep you posted, and we'll send out all the dates to you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're thrilled to be working
Thank
together
you.
and look forward to the next meeting.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
Yes. So, again, we just wanted to kind of give you a general overview of, what Moon's group will be doing. That way, we're all in the know about it. And again, we'll try to publicize as much as possible now that we're allowed to do so. Now that all the contracts are signed and things like that too. And so feel free, I know everyone has their own sort of stakeholder relationships as well. And so anyone that you guys know of that, would like to know and would like to participate, feel free to spread it as much as possible. So, the next topic here, we just wanted to touch base on the January 14th hearing that we just had. And so just any insights or any thoughts or any questions, and we can sort of roll the public commentary into that too, to kind of keep in interest everyone's time frame too. But anything in particular you guys pulled from that, or anything that you wanted to discuss from the hearing at this point? I don't really hear anything said from there. So one thing that we kind of stood out to me was the need, and Susan kind of brought this up too in conversation as well as Ben, with the need for more public engagement. That was one of the comments that kind of stood out to me from the public commentary. And so, it's been something that since the day after the hearing, I've been working with Ben and talking to Maddie as well as Molly to try to see if we can improve on that. And so that's something that the public outreach committee will be working with as well, to kind of help get that footprint out, and that'll help us with the district website as well as sort of getting the word out about our hearings coming up. Go ahead, Amber.
Chris, you're breaking up a little bit. You're kind of fading in and out just a little bit.
Got it.
I don't
Sorry.
know if you can move a little closer. Okay.
You guys hear me now? Okay, perfect. So I was just saying, that's something that the community outreach committee is working on right now, to kind of help get our footprint out there a lot more, to kind of get the public in the know about what we're doing. But yeah. Any other thoughts you guys had, or any other questions at all about the 14th meeting? Hearing, sorry.
I don't have any questions or comments. I thought it was a great meeting. It was so exciting to hear from those people. It kind of pumped me up again, to be involved in all this. And it was really good to hear from those people.
And from that too, I've been speaking with Rebecca Lopez, who was the first story that we heard from, just to try to see if we can get, at least in the 4th district, some of the stakeholder groups, some of the community groups as well, get some contacts with them so we can submit. Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah, no, not very well.
Figured, yeah. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I've been reaching out to Rebecca Lopez, who was the first lawyer that we spoke to try to see if we can get some of the names of the community of interest groups here in Milwaukee, that we can reach out to kind of help us, spread the word of the, train the trainers as well as get their input as well. And then Attorney Jones is also going to reach out to us with some of the Voting Rights Act context too. And so as soon as I get that information, I'll disseminate as well. All right. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we can go ahead and see if there's any other committee updates, and if not, we can kind of go from there. So. All right, guys. So, so I just wanted to put this in here. This is more so a placeholder for the day. I feel like the majority of our meetings going forward will be in collaboration with Moon's group as well. And so I just wanted to kind of get this portion of the meeting going. That way we can sort of work on our subcommittees in the interim and then bring it back to larger groups to kind of keep focus. But in it, I've met individually with, Emery and I met at the end of the year with individual commissioners, and then, had some discussions about the committee as well. But so essentially just kind of starting out with the Action on Census group. So this group, Tony is on it right now, but kind of works with the line group as well. So my idea for this is to kind of help synthesize some of that data that Moon is talking about and kind of help us implement it while we have it going. But I guess we can kind of combine it with the line drawers. Any updates that you guys have at this point in time? Again, probably nothing at this point.
Yeah, I don't think, I know that we had that little meeting of the line drawers committee to talk about criteria, but then we determined that we would wait for what Moon did tonight. And so, yeah, the only question I almost asked but didn't was if as we get in with Moon a little bit more and more, can we use the prior census data from say 2010 and start to practice drawing the maps or using our criteria before we have the July final census data? I think the answer will be yeah, but that'll be interesting.
Yeah. And I think, once we, as you say, once we get some of that criterion down, like we can really start to, plug and chug from some of this data that we have too. And so it sounds like, some of the 2020 district info that she has in there too, as well, to kind of get a shell. So yeah, I agree. All right. Yeah, go for it, Emery.
I was just going to suggest, you had maybe suggested that the census and the line drawers, the overlap between the two groups, maybe, condense it into one. Yeah, and that sounds reasonable to me. I can let Tony might want to weigh in that, but there's a lot of overlap.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, that sounds great. You mean you don't want two roles, Tony? You can. You have two hats, man. I'll give you this. Yeah, no, that sounds like a great idea. As far as the expert selection committee, so Susan is on it by herself right now, and so that's essentially she's been kind of speaking to Moon before we decided to go with her, but ultimately it'll be to kind of help bring in some of the experts that we talk about later on, and so hopefully we'll continue that going as well. So. I don't think Ben is here today, but one thing that as I said before, we're going to be working with Ben as well as Commissioner Tobias, who's secondary on it as well, to kind of help us with the community outreach and engagement. And so I think that's going to be a big part in going forward for us to, sort of get our social media presence out there, either that's creation of a page or to kind of get the word out more about our hearings as we start to go down the line and as it becomes more and more at the forefront of everyone's mind in the state. So we'll go ahead and go through with that. Emery already gave her update as well, but anything else that you had, Emery, for project management standpoint? Okay. And then as far as community of interest, Commissioner Prentice, do you have anything at this point?
No, I don't.
Okay, sounds good. And then Commissioner Anthony, I spoke to him earlier about the lessons learned committee as well. And so that'll sort of look at some of the previous data and methods that are used. And so we'll kind of go from that when we get to that point. But, so yeah, so that's pretty much all the committees there, guys. So Does anybody else have any questions or any new topics to bring up before?
Well, I just wanted to go back to the kind of the beginning, Anne Marie. What's the action plan to send out information to Fair Maps and the other groups like what's the action plan to send out the information for Train the Trainer and to submit COI information?
That's an excellent question, Tony. I think that Melissa and Susan, right, is on that committee. I think they need to sit with it and talk about it. And I would be happy to talk to you a little bit further about my thoughts after attending that. It's a bit of a project management project as well, outline who we want to talk to and rolling it out. If you would like help, Melissa, in just establishing timelines and just doing some of the organizational part of it, I'll be happy to assist with whatever you need. But I think that needs to be decided, Tony, on how we want to do it. Do we want to be, the question, I guess, and Melissa, do we want to have a lot of oversight on how it's rolled out into the grassroots communities? Or I think if we just spread the word and let it go, we're not going to get the outreach that we want. I think we have to be thoughtful about our partnerships and trying to reach out to a broad range of partners. Maybe not just our traditional Fair Maps and League partners, but maybe there's other organizations in different communities that have shown an interest in Fair Maps. Maybe there's church communities or something like that we can kind of bring into the fold. And I think we're going to have conversations with the leaders of these communities as the commissioner, that is, maybe if you have a personal relationship, and then get their help to roll it out. And I think that we have to set timelines and ask the organizations, like, for example, the league said they would be happy to participate. So the news comes out through the executive director, and then each chapter knows that it's there and it's supported. So then I think the role would be for one of the commissioners or someone to email each president of each league, say, this is what we want. These are where all the trainer dates are coming up, and this is the link to the MGG, and answer whatever questions they have. And then we'll have to kind of let them decide after they take the training how they and what timeline they can have personally. I can just imagine that, say, a chapter president or a chapter voting person, whoever is comfortable, would do the training and then have a Zoom meeting and organize it and publicize it within that community, get the data, and then the data is just going to go straight to Moon's group, and we don't have to be involved. But I think we just have to be involved in recruitment of trainers.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Anne Marie, and certainly welcome any assistance. But I think that's a really good kind of overview of how it should go. And I think the key will be identifying some of those other groups. The Fair Maps Coalition and League of Women Voters are some obvious ones that do have a kind of foothold in smaller communities throughout the state. And I think, and they're certainly, I know, already tuned in and ready to help. But I do think there's going to be other groups that we'll want to reach out to as well.
There are a couple groups in our that gave public testimony to, some representatives from those groups, and so maybe that's a good place to look for that, those folks as well.
Maybe we could ask each commissioner, including the ones that are not able to be with us right now, is to come up with a few different groups that they feel would be good, and maybe forward those on to Melissa. And like I said, I know you're busy. I can help organize if you want, but just get that list together, and then just start seeing how many groups we have and agreeing that these are our targeted groups and then let the commissioners do their individual reach outs.
I think we have a now functional website. Do we do like, hey, looking for communities of interest sort of announcement on the website, or do people look at that? You know what I'm saying? Do we try to get it out more generally somehow?
Yeah, so I've been working on the website a little bit, and I think part of what we'll see, at least in terms of generating direction towards the site, is when we have this submission portal available, that'll just generate a lot more flow to that website, which will go straight to MGGG. And we can also incorporate some way to direct people to this Train the Trainer, so we can get more of like a random smattering of folks that are not necessarily affiliated with these groups that we would normally do work with, which I think is important too, based on what Moon was saying. And then I'll also just add, one of the things that I had talked to our communications department about is figuring out how to incorporate this into more regular press and things like that too. So, and that's more to come on that, I think, and more offline conversations on that, but that's something that is definitely on people's radar too.
Yeah, you'll notice, I think, that Maddie and I both turned our cameras on when this subject started, just to say essentially that there's talks happening on our end of things, and that when we can give you a little more update, we will be excited to do so, and that could be next meeting. And I'm going to share my cell phone to the email group. So if anyone wants to talk to me one-on-one, or Maddie, of course, obviously, that's an option too. I just don't have much to share now, other than that we have this on our minds too. They're using our pulpit, so to speak, to try to garner more, those direct submissions and press stuff, but also talking to groups that we might not always associate with redistricting. So just wanted to give you guys that update.
Commissioner Rangel at one point had talked about a Facebook page, and I don't know if that's still under discussion or where we're at with that. Is there an update?
So go ahead, Maddie, sorry.
I was just going to say, it is something that is on our radar in terms of an option, and I think will be part of this larger discussion of what the strategic outreach plan could and should look like, and the usefulness of the tools, making sure that the tools that we're using are the most useful ones and efficient way to disseminate the information.
Yeah, if somebody's, yeah. Never mind. I'm jumping ahead too. I'm going to stop.
Any other questions or any comments that you guys have before we adjourn? All right, guys. Well, we'll go ahead and close out. Thank everyone for coming today, and we'll keep you posted with any of the updates that we have, and we'll see you next meeting. So stay safe, everyone. Enjoy the day. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.